The following is a Spirit Street production.
So the Big 12 had 6 teams that were in the NCAA baseball tournament this year. They're down to 2, West Virginia and Kansas State. I think both didn't necessarily have the seasons that they thought they were going to have initially, but they are still playing baseball right now, and that's all that matters. We'll talk a little bit about that and probably shift over to a little bit of football moving forward. So look forward to having a good conversation with my man, Mike Casazza, today. We appreciate you guys being here. This is Big 12 Insiders.
Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
All right, welcome back to Big 12 Insiders, everybody. Mike Casazza is joining us today. We're talking a little bit of NCAA baseball, Big 12 baseball. 2 teams still going on, Mike. First off, how are you doing today, my man?
I'm alive, you know. It's funny, when West Virginia baseball kind of had its little renaissance, it was just kind of – it was the bridge between the basketball and football seasons.
Right.
Neither one has been very sturdy on the other end of the bridge, but
Right.
baseball has actually been – the exciting, it's been better than a bridge the past couple of years. A couple of regional appearances, and now this unprecedented super regional, really kind of sentimental story with the manager retiring at the end of the season. This is kind of a unique thing, obviously, but it's also, on top of that, just a very good story around here too.
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing with K-State. And you know, I kind of touched on this at the beginning. You know, I think most people, baseball people, thought that K-State and West Virginia were going to have really good seasons this year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that if you just look at the regular season, that it was actually the win totals that both would have wanted or anticipated. But having said that, Mike, and kind of what I mentioned at the beginning, they're still playing. And that's the main thing, is that they are still playing baseball and have a legitimate shot of getting to Omaha in the College World Series.
Yeah. It's a best of 3 series right now. That's what's crazy. You play all these games, and West Virginia's had some low moments this year.
Right.
It's also an extremely resilient team. So if they do go down 0-1, or if it's, you know, if you have like elimination innings where they got to get a run or otherwise it's over, it would not count them out. You know, it's funny, Brian, you say they haven't had the season that they wanted. And that's, I mean, I don't know as much about Kansas State there. I know that they've made it this far, so it must be good. And as you said, ultimately,
Sure,
it's like my golf game. It's not how, it's how many, right? So,
right.
how many rounds are they in? That's where they're at right now. West Virginia, for 2 reasons, this is not terribly unexpected. One, they struggle at the start of every year just because of the climate here. They don't get to practice outside. They play like sometimes 20 road games to start the year, because you can't have home games here until, you know, when I say late March, sometimes it's April. Like you'll get a random snow squall and they'll cancel a Tuesday game in the middle of April. I'm not telling anybody in Manhattan anything they don't know about here. So it takes a while to get warmed up. And then this season, I think they thought they were going to be good. I mean, I know they thought they were going to be good. It's the reigning shared Big 12 champion. They had, convention said, the number 1 pick in the draft, and J.J. Weatherholt. He gets hurt right away, and he misses 24 games. And along the way, their first baseman, their catcher, a number of pitchers get hurt. It was late in the season before they had their 9 and their rotation multiple weekends in a row. And it's just, that's not healthy, but they persevered. And, you know, for a team that maybe has 6 or 7 bats, to have to fill in with injuries among those 6 or 7, and also to get those 7, 8, 9 spots in the order, they got a ton of experience in players. And when you get deep into the season here, you know, matchups, they're facing a left-handed pitcher today, so you have to match some things up, you think. Same with their bullpen and their starting pitchers. They've been through so much with injuries and travel schedule. The Big 12, their non-conference was difficult. They've and again, resilient team. Like, they lost by 15 runs one game and they won by 15 the next. They got no hit by Oklahoma and they won the series. These are all things that happen in short time. And for them to be here right now, I just think it doesn't surprise them, and nothing at this point will.
Right. Well, the thing about it is, you mentioned one, you know, it's a 3-game series, and the best of 3. They're facing a team that a lot of people picked at the beginning, you know, North Carolina, to go to the College World Series. Kansas State is kind of doing the same thing. They're taking on Virginia on the road. Let me ask you this question. There were 6 teams that were in, and we include Oklahoma and Texas in that. Moving forward, with Oklahoma and Texas leaving, I would think that having at least 2 teams and 2 of the 6 in that were not them, because again, Oklahoma and Texas are perennial baseball powers. They just are. But having West Virginia and Kansas State, does that speak well for the conference moving forward that, we're going to be okay, with baseball moving forward versus, okay, they're leaving and the perception is the Big 12 will be dead with baseball?
Yeah, I never got that. I think the doom for football was one thing. Basketball, absolutely not.
Right.
And again, the other conferences, they might exceed expectations in some of the smaller sports, such as baseball and Big 12. I just don't think you think of that region of the country necessarily as baseball. That's
Right.
warmer climate so they can play year round. Man, if you look at what some of these teams have done when they've gotten in, Oklahoma State, Texas, TCU, it's been pretty good baseball. And granted, that's in some warmer weather places where they can play baseball all year, or they can recruit players who are nearby or in their state. That helps. But, I think when you look at the future here, Arizona and Arizona State have been good at baseball. Um,
Mm-hmm.
UCF had a good team this year. I don't know why Houston was as down as it was, but that has been a very good baseball program across time too. I think the potential is certainly there to have a pretty robust standings every season. And if you have some of those schools I just mentioned get in and get going, and then you can continue with some of the momentum that a West Virginia will have to maintain through a coaching change, what Kansas
Right.
State has been doing. Can TCU get it back? Not that it was gone, but it wasn't TCU's year as they expect. There's potential for every year. I mean, 15 teams to be competitive here. I say 15 because no Iowa State, but
Right.
could you see? I mean, I think people look in the football standings and going, "Wow, this might be crazy." It might be crazy, but you could have a very good, very competitive top half, top 2/3 of the baseball conference.
Right. And I kind of think what we've mentioned several times on the show before is the Big 12, like in football, the strength is in numbers. And I think the same thing can be true in baseball. Strength being numbers. Yeah, we know about Texas and Oklahoma, but I think more so in baseball, there are more names in baseball that baseball people around the country know about these programs a little more. It's hard to say who's a blue blood, Mike, in baseball. I mean, it's just hard to say that. There's certain programs that are out there. And again, you mentioned the warmer weather climate, and they're going to be good every year. It's just what they are. But it's hard to pin that on somebody. Having said that, I just think kind of what you mentioned, strength in numbers is going to be the key for baseball moving forward with the Big 12, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's probably true with a lot of places here. But and again, if you've got a top half, top 2/3, like I said there, and you're going to get those teams in series a bunch, your RPI and your strength of schedule is going to be good. You're going to have quality wins.
Correct.
You're not going to have terrible losses. So you could apply similar rationale to baseball as you might to basketball, except you're having more games. So you're going to have more
Right.
data points there. I think it's just going to be useful too. I think what'll be interesting is because the way the conferences are aligned right now, and we're speaking probably more specifically about football, but football obviously has its hands on everything.
Mm-hmm.
I just think like the ability to get and to retain coaches is super important now. And if you can look in the Big 12 and say, man, they get, they have infrastructure here. They'll devote resources to this. It's a revenue sharing thing. Wow, there's a lot of money there. NIL is great. Yeah, the Big 12's not bad. And if you can, reinforce that with results, you're going to get good coaches in this conference because it's a power league with really good programs in here too. And maybe more importantly, you don't lose them to other schools. Like I think it was probably surprising to a lot of people that TCU's coach left for Texas A&M.
Right.
TCU's a good program. Texas A&M is a bigger program.
Yeah.
Will that chasm still be there in the future? I don't know. We'll see, but maybe they can close those gaps. And again, like a lot of the stuff is flowchart stuff. It begins at the top and it goes to the bottom. If you have a good manager there, you can take care of a lot of messes underneath that just because like I said, it starts at the top. And if you recruit and develop and all that stuff, same as any sport, it'll be imperative for baseball to do that.
Absolutely. So we're going to take a quick break here. On the other side of this, we'll flip the script to a little football, talk a little West Virginia football going into the summertime. One word from our sponsor, Synergy Financial Partners, and we'll be right back.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's return to Studio 73.
All right, welcome back to Big 12 Insiders again. It's Brien Hanley with Mike Casazza. So, Mike, let's talk a little football here.
Yes.
West Virginia, we're heading into the summertime. First things first, let me just ask this because obviously it's a question on everybody's mind, or I shouldn't say everybody, but it's just a conversation that always has to come up. Is West Virginia done trying to get people from the transfer portal?
No, and they're over the scholarship limit. That's what's kind of crazy. Like they were at 80, they were at 85, and they added. I'm trying to get my math right here, 2 or 3, but certainly at least 2. I don't know if it was 3, but so they're going to have players who retire or just walk away from the sport, graduate and leave or whatever. You don't have to use the transfer portal for that. And I don't think they're done. I mean, they've added players just recently. Like I was on vacation and I had a whole bunch of stories planned, including one about receivers. And they signed a 6'4" receiver who played at Mississippi State. And they did not go after a receiver before spring football. They got one, Jaden Bray from Oklahoma State, but not what they were looking for. You know, the big alpha outside guy. Bray's a useful part, versatile, maybe more of an inside guy, could help you in the return game. But they get a 6'4" receiver from Mississippi State because they're like, we kind of lack that in the spring. Can we grab one? And he was in the portal for a few days, and then he's in Morgantown. So I think they'll have their eyes open for some things. You know, they might look at a defensive line acquisition. They had high hopes for Corey McIntyre, kind of a defensive tackle, nose guard guy, and he has likely a season-ending knee injury during the spring. That makes them shorter there. But you know, then he was going to be a redshirt freshman. I don't know how much you expect out of him in the trenches. So they were thinking that way a little bit. Maybe they're nudged toward that outcome now more. So they may not yet be done. So it's going to be interesting how they work the abacus to make sure that the numbers are right and you got enough people going out to accommodate the people coming in. But I don't think they're finished. Like Brien, they don't need a quarterback, right? They had Gary Green, they had Nico Marchio. They went and they got Ryder Burton from BYU.
Right.
Pretty talented player if he gets everything on line like people projected he would have before. And here he is, redshirt freshman, which, by the way, 1 year behind Nico. So they have a competition lined up for several years here now. Right.
My whole thing with all of this transfer portal stuff is kind of what you said. It's like teams, it seems like they're not, there's plenty of teams that are just plugging holes, but there's plenty of teams out there and you see them, it's like this depth thing. And I'm like, why are guys transferring to just go compete somewhere? You would think that they're transferring, okay, I'm going to go get me a job somewhere. Because my thing is, if it's just about, okay, well, I got to go compete somewhere, what's wrong with where they're currently at? They made that decision to be there. Again, we're trying to dive into the minds of 18 to 22-year-old, kids out there. But at the same time, I just don't understand a lot of what's going on. I do understand what the coaches are thinking. They're thinking the same thing is, hey, if I can go get somebody that already has gone through a weight program and understands what it's like to be a student athlete, I will gladly put that person on the bench and let them compete for a job and gladly build my depth that way versus a high school kid where I don't know. And I think that's kind of where all this craziness is starting to happen, Mike.
Yeah, I think and all the metrics have changed too. So a year ago, they signed a transfer from Kentucky named Tomiwa Durajai, and he was a redshirt freshman when he came to West Virginia. So he redshirted Kentucky. He came to West Virginia, and he transferred, right? So he'd use his transfer. And if he's going to transfer, he'd already used a redshirt season. So he's got to transfer and sit out a season. And West Virginia was thinking, we'll never lose this guy. He's going to be a developmental player who they loved in the initial recruiting cycle. He just picked the SEC in Kentucky. Has a very good year here. The rules change where everybody's eligible, due in part to West Virginia's basketball situation, and he leaves. And he's at Florida State. And that's kind of an anecdote for just how crazy this is and how frustrating it is because you think you have a plan and you don't. And now I just don't know if you can or should plan for 4 years. Like, I wonder how many times a player goes into a coach's office and says, are you going to be here for my 4 years on campus? Because the coach is going to say, are you going to be here 2 years? Right. So now, like, the coaches are the ones that flew around and floated from school to school. That is not the case anymore. And, so now, and just subsequent to that, like, do athletic directors believe you have to have 4 and 5 years on your head coach's contract now? Like, because how many players are actually wondering about that? Is that going to be used negatively in recruiting? There's just so many things that start from this one point and it affects everything else. And like, I can't even probably answer all your questions sufficiently because they're very good and they're very broad answers. But every time you try to answer one, you think of 3 or 4 other consequences to one simple action about the transfer portal and what it does. So I think at a place like West Virginia, which may be prone to lose people sometimes, they don't have the greatest NIL, But they do bring players in who are of a certain caliber, looking for a second chance or a final send-off. But can they keep players too? That used to be a knock against Brown. Recruit and develop, sure, but retention was an issue. I mean, if that's still an issue now, I'm not saying it is. He's got one more of his players and high school recruits on campus, but like you can replace those guys now too. And with experience, we've been to the weight room now too. So, what used to be negatives or what used to be soft spots, maybe not so much anymore.
Right. I just think a change or a shift in philosophy overall is something that schools are doing, and they just have to. With the way that the rules are and people being able to move around like that, you got to shift. And don't get me wrong, you still want to be, recruit, develop, all that good stuff. But at the same time, when the decision isn't yours or it's taken out of your hands and you just don't know, it's like, what are you supposed to do? You can't just sit on your hands and say, well, I wish it was this way. Well, yeah, that's fine, but that'll end up getting you fired because you're not going to have a team after that.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Diving into West Virginia just a little bit, you look at the beginning of the schedule, and I look at, I believe they're one of the few teams that actually play. What do they have? One Group of 5 school, because they have,
Zero.
they don't have any Group of 5s, do they? That's right. They play all Power 5s all year long. Is that correct?
They play 11 Power 5s. I want to say there's 4 or 5 other schools. The number 5 is involved. There's 5 total or 5 more. I forget who. It's the few in I wouldn't say proud because you'd rather not do this, but their non-conference opponents are Penn State, which is going to be a top 7 team, and Pitt, which is a pretty heated rivalry where anything can and probably will happen there too. So those are not run-of-the-mill Power 5 opponents either.
No, that's the thing. First of all, I love that rivalry between West Virginia and Pitt.
Yeah.
I know it went away due to conference realignment, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure there's other details on why, but I'm glad it's back. It's just one of those rivalries that I think college football needs. We've gotten away from so much of that and made everything about, well, what conference, how much money we've made that. And we've kind of lost sight a little bit, Mike, on what college football, and again, just talking about college football, about what college football is and what makes it fun. And I know when we kick the ball off, a lot of that stuff changes, but at the same time, there's certain things that you just got to look forward to. And for me, being a college football fan of 48 years, I love the Pitt-West Virginia rivalry. I think it's something that, number one, I think a lot of people pay attention to it outside of just West Virginia and Pitt. I think it's one of those games that people are like, yeah, this is a crazy football game. These people don't like each other. They get after it. This kind of epitomizes what college football is.
Yeah, and West Virginia quietly, but certainly has been like a model for non-conference scheduling. Not the only one to do this, but you could look at other schools and say, wow, they're not doing this. Or like you could say, what should my non-conference look like? And it's not exactly West Virginia, but also that's the point too, because maybe it shouldn't look like this. This 2 Power 5 thing is goofy. But not long ago, there was no Big 12 championship game, and it was going to be increasingly more difficult for outsiders to get into the college football playoff. And they came up with this whole thing called the data point, remember? And West Virginia said, you know what? We're going to get our data point in non-conference play. And if you look at the past, let's say 10 or so years, they've had marquee non-conference games. And they've also, and like neutral site stuff against Alabama and Tennessee, but also some rivalries like Maryland and Virginia Tech and Pitt. But the 2 a year is just too big of a bite when you look at 9 conference games and having to play, an uneven number of road games every other year. Why do this? And you look around and you say, well, no one else is doing this. And by the way, that data point exists now in the conference championship game. So if we just finish in the top 2, we have a chance to actually get that data point. So they're tailoring everything in the future. There's, I think, 2 years left of multiple Power 5s, and it may even be just 1. And then they're going to go play Group of 5 teams. When I say go play, they're going to go play to get into these series. They're going to have home and homes. Like they're going to Ohio U in a couple of years, which is a reasonable road trip. Right. But it's also like a way to get that series because a lot of these non-conference opponents now from the Group of 5 realize, 1, lucrative because they need the money, and these other opponents have it. They lure it over. But 2, like they have to have them because otherwise you're playing Penn State and Pitt, and you're in September with maybe 2 losses when even Ohio would probably admit you might not have that second loss if you play in Athens. So kind of a whole new world for not just West Virginia, but you can look through the West Virginia lens and see how other schools are doing this now.
Absolutely. Flip the script here real quick and just ask you about the whole house NCAA deal that's going on, the settlement that has happened. So with West Virginia, and I've asked a couple of other people the same question, has there been any talk about what obviously nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. So to try to pinpoint, okay, what exactly are you doing? We can't do that right now because we don't know all the specifics and the logistics of everything. But I'm assuming that West Virginia clearly, or let me just say, I'm assuming they have some sort of plan on what they're going to do. And has there been any talk about them possibly getting rid of any sports if they're having to make this huge yearly payout every year?
And I think publicly, no, because you don't want that, especially right now where, football's doing well. Basketball has some excitement with the new coach. We just mentioned the baseball team. They have some momentum here. They've had a really good athletic year when you look at the smaller sports and even what happened in football. Basketball notwithstanding, but that happened. But maybe not the time to rain on this parade that they've kind of in earnest got going. Privately, absolutely, there have been conversations. And that involves, like, what can you afford? Who can you afford? But also, how does Title IX work, Brian? That's the one thing that's just like, that's the ghost right now that no one really knows how to get in the box or how to corner or to figure out how to chase it out of the room. I don't know how that's going to work, but that's going to create some decisions. And then the other thing is, like, is Title IX, is it just the offering and availability, or is it equity in compensation? Because there's no way you could equitably, you could force equity, or you could apply equity to just the sports. And, like, I'm not saying even a male female sport. I'm just saying, like, men sometimes, like a football player is going to draw more NIL than a men's soccer player. And men's soccer was in the national semifinals last year, maybe even the national final, College Cup. So, like, a highly successful team on campus, but just isn't going to have the noticeability and marketability of a football player who maybe doesn't even play that much too. So I wonder how that Title IX stuff is going to work. There are conversations, do you have to cut sports, more importantly, and this is what they're absolutely not talking about, where are they going to generate the revenue? Is that in the stands? Is it in the concessions? Is it in guarantees? Like, is West Virginia basketball going to go play some guarantee games? Is West Virginia football going to go play some guarantee games and make hundreds of thousands of dollars? Or if they do it multiple times, millions? Maybe that's a necessity, but those are all things right now, because, like, there's a long list of schools that cannot afford 20 to 22 million a year off the cap and then to live comfortably. And that's like a societal thing. Like, if you took away a whole bunch of my salary, I'm eating ramen and like, then a sausage is in a can, right? And that's not what I want to do. So I got to figure that out. And I think what strikes a lot of people is how fast this happened. It did. Like, we've been reading about it for a while, but when you step back and you look at the timeline of college sports, and even this revolution, let's say, that started with the Alston case. By the way, another West Virginia attachment. He's a former West Virginia player. That's not that long. It's not a generation, right? It's just a handful of years, and bang, here we are with revenue sharing, which you would not have thought of. You never would imagine this before. And here it is. And what happens? And how do you control expenses now? Are schools going to want to pay buyouts to coaches to hire them? I heard of, like, I covered a coaching search this offseason. I heard, like, significant names were not going to buy out coaches. They were not going to hire coaches because they didn't want to pay the buyout. We're talking like $1 million in some cases. They didn't want to do that because they needed to have that money for a rainy day. They didn't think that rainy day was coming so fast, but it's been in their minds for a while, and not just West Virginia. It's been in those long conference rooms they have in those long tables they have in those conference rooms. You get a lot of people around them. You get a lot of people thinking about it. You get a lot of ideas, and right now you just have a lot of questions and suggestions and not a lot of answers.
Yeah, it's a mess. It'll get figured out eventually. I mean, I think people think that doomsday is coming like tomorrow. And if you even say that it's doomsday, nothing is going to happen overnight. This is going to play out for a while. Again, they got to make some decisions on exactly how much and where. So I appreciate, Mike, you taking the time today, man. I know it's the dog days of summer here, so appreciate it. And West Virginia fans, good luck in your series against North Carolina. I hope you can make it to Omaha. Same thing to Kansas State. Go beat Virginia. Go get to Omaha. So I appreciate everybody being in here. We're going to take one final break with Synergy Financial. We'll end the show.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's return to Studio 73.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Hey, just a quick word. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe. We are 16 away from getting to that that magical number of 1,000 subscribers. So anybody that hasn't subscribed, please make sure you go to Big 12 Insiders at 24/7 Sports on YouTube, and please go subscribe. We're going to be making some changes to the show. I don't know exactly what they're going to be. Most likely, we're going to cut it down to 3 days a week during the summer, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're going to figure all that out and go from there. But we'll definitely let you know what some of the changes are. The one thing to do is constantly leave questions, not only in the chat, but questions in the comments when you go look at the video, because that's going to be a lot of what we're doing this summer is making shows based on the questions that you have about the Big 12 Conference. So most important thing, please make sure you subscribe. We appreciate all that support. And also, please make sure when you do watch the videos, please make sure that you leave a comment and just let us know, number one, what you think, but two, what things you want to hear, all that kind of good stuff. And we'll start collaborating and put it all together for you guys with the show. So appreciate you guys being here. Thank you. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you guys next week.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.